Good morning to everyone who is here, and to our audience, our participants, and of course our wonderful panel of speakers here. My name is Sunaina Kumar, and I work with the Center for New Economic Diplomacy, and I will be the moderator for this session. Before we begin, I would like to invite Mr. Suri to deliver the welcome note. He is the director of the Center for New Economic Diplomacy, and he will be sharing some of what we will be discussing this morning, along with telling us a little more about what we're trying to do with the CNED initiative here.
Thank you, Sunaina, and hello friends, greeting from the Observer Research Foundation. Thank you very much for taking the time to join us today on this virtual platform. I want to share a couple of thoughts with you about our Center for New Economic Diplomacy and why we are so actively engaged with the BIMSTEC region on these issues. So CNED, the Center for New Economic Diplomacy that I head, we've given ourselves a rather ambitious mandate to try and reimagine economic diplomacy in a 21st century context. You know, we want to try and go beyond the traditional areas of trade and investment and look at some of the really major emerging challenges that our countries face. And what we've tried to do is kind of cluster these into 4 or 5 different pillars, dealing with climate change and sustainable development, human capital, including both health and education, the exciting possibilities of leveraging technology for development, the importance of including gender across all the facets of our work, and finally, a fresh look at the existing framework of development cooperation by bringing in not only new sectors, but also new actors into this conversation. And we do this by focusing on some of the contemporary challenges of climate change, health, education, and by highlighting the opportunities for new actors. It could be tech startups, it could be social entrepreneurs, it could be civil society organizations that bring so much of passion and expertise into the development work that they do. And we are trying to see, can we create a framework where these partner with our governments to deliver superior outcomes. For CNED, we have a very strong focus on BIMSTEC and on Africa. And what we are trying to do really is create a dynamic platform where some of the best ideas and practices on these challenges that we face today can be shared. We want to try and build a community of experts around the region, a community that feels comfortable exchanging views, engaging with each other on some of these issues that really matter to our countries. Some of you would have already seen the BIMSTEC 2021 publication that we brought out last month. And I want to personally thank each of the contributors who worked with Dr. Anshoya and in putting this publication together. And since we are all from the BIMSTEC region, may I also commend Dr. Anshoya and Professor Chatterjee's recent new book titled Reimagining BIMSTEC because of the areas that it explores. We're very fortunate that we have with us today Mr. Karthik Pandey, Director in the Ministry of External Affairs. He has the heavy responsibility of shepherding our ties with Bangladesh and with Myanmar. And we've requested if Mr. Pandey can provide us with a short overview of or an Indian perspective on BIMSTEC. So over to you, Karthik Pandey.
Thank you, sir. So, at the very outset, Director, Center for New Economic Diplomacy, and a cherished colleague and senior in the Indian Foreign Service, the Ambassador Navdeep Suri. Thank you, sir. It is indeed a matter of great privilege for me to speak here in this panel chaired by you and with the participation of experts from the region, sir. So, what I will very quickly try to do is, basically give an overview of our relationship with Bangladesh and Myanmar, basically focusing on the connectivity sphere, which is one of the most important sort of cornerstones of their relationship, of our relationship with these countries, and that would also impinge on how sort of India engages in the BIMSTEC. Sir. So I will quickly start with Bangladesh. Sir. So as is well known, India and Bangladesh have a all-encompassing win-win relationship, which is based on sovereignty, equality, trust, and understanding that we say goes beyond a strategic relationship. And our relationship with Bangladesh is a vital cog in our neighborhood first policy. In fact, former EM used to say when it is neighborhood first, it's Bangladesh first, actually. So, but within that, connectivity is, of course, a major cornerstone of our engagement. And to a certain extent, it is of course defined by geography, because we share almost a 4,097 kilometers border with Bangladesh, also a maritime border. Shortest access to our northeast runs through routes through Bangladesh, and Bangladesh also finds a ready market in the northeast. So what I'll quickly run through our connectivity initiatives sector by sector, sir. So, I mean, let's start from the most logical ones, so the transport connectivity. And enhancing transport connectivity to Bangladesh and through Bangladesh to our northeast is in a manner that is beneficial to both countries and peoples is one of our main goals at a pace at which Bangladesh is comfortable. And the most well-known aspect is the railways. India and Bangladesh had around I think 6 rail links in the pre-1965 eras. We have actually succeeded in re-establishing 5 of them. And another one, a 7th link between Agartala and Akhura is also being financed by India under Grantin Aid and will come on stream shortly. We already have 2 passenger trains running from West Bengal to Bangladesh, the Dhaka and the Maitri and the Bandhan Express. And discussions are ongoing for a 3rd link through the newly inaugurated Chilihati-Haldibari link. Both sides are quick on their feet. When onset of COVID sort of disrupted the normal trade flows, both sides quickly started the parcel train service and the container train service between the 2 countries. And I'm happy to report that this has been a big hit, because it has also to a certain extent short-circuited the delays that were there. On sort of multimodal connectivity, India and Bangladesh have agreed to the use of Chattogram and Mongla Port for transshipment of goods from India. The first trial run was conducted in July 2020. Added to that, both countries amended the 1972 protocol on the inland water trade and transit and added 2 more protocol routes, making it a total of 10. And this will actually give us additional connectivity to Northeast, especially Tripura. There are operational bus services, including Kolkata Khulna, Dhaka Kolkata, Dhaka Agartala, Dhaka Shillong Guwahati. Discussions are on for another one between Dhaka and Siliguri. All these initiatives to a certain extent have been affected by the COVID pandemic, and some are right now in a sort of a frozen state, but they are very much on. And India, in the regional context, we have stepped up our efforts to improve road connectivity between the 2 countries, especially through the BBIN format, which is also again in an advanced state of negotiation, but some work needs to be done. India has a very big portfolio of around $7.8 billion, if I remember correctly, of line of credit support to Bangladesh. Quite a few of these are actually for augmenting connectivities. And in the coming days, we'll see that there are a few projects in the pipeline, including a bridge to connect over the Feni River to connect Sabroom in Tripura to Ramgarh in Bangladesh. And that gives us another access to Chattogram, and Bangladesh goods another access to our northeast. Another news which I'm sure this distinguished panel is aware of is Bangladesh's recent interest in the India-Myanmar Thailand highway projects. So that is also under discussion. We are waiting for the specifics from the Bangladesh side. So that is actually transport. Now, if we come to some energy cooperation, which is again a very important facet. So, with Bangladesh at the moment imports around 1,160 megawatts of power through India. And India is also assisting Bangladesh in projects amounting to 3,600 megawatts through public and private means, including the flagship Maitri Super Thermal Power Project, which is coming up at Rampal in Khulna. There is also a proposal for interconnecting Parvatipur in Bangladesh with Katihar in eastern India and Bornagar in northeastern India through a 765 kV link. This is under discussion. Once it comes through, it will be another great sort of interconnection initiative. Again, sir, in October 2019, both prime ministers had agreed to LPG from Bangladesh being supplied to IOCL center in Tripura. Again, this is LPG which is supplied through Bangladesh trucks into Tripura, showing that how this thing can be worked towards benefit of both countries. Government of India is also extending financial assistance for a 130 kilometers pipeline, friendship pipeline as we call it, for supply of high-speed diesel from Siliguri to a terminal in Parvatipur. Hopefully, this project will come on stream late in this year itself. IOCL has also formed a joint venture company with Beximco, which is one of the leading companies in Bangladesh in the petroleum sector. The people-to-people ties between the two countries have always been strong, sir. And basically, Bangladesh has our biggest visa operations. And before COVID, I mean, in 2019-20, I think around 1.6 million visas were issued there. And once it comes, the situation gets a little bit more normal, so it will come back. And so another in the power sector, we had actually. India had formulated the cross-border guidelines on the trade of electricity. That is very, very relevant in the regional context, because Bangladesh also has some plans to export or import electricity from Nepal and from Bhutan. So once this is finally approved, this actually will be the gateway through which such transactions would happen. So. Also, sir, we have been focusing on the area of border huts, and currently, I think 4 border huts, 2 each in Meghalaya and Tripura, are functional. Work, however, is on, and we hope to inaugurate some more when Honorable PM visits Bangladesh, sir. So this is just a very broad and a very summary sort of outlook on connectivity on Bangladesh. And I think I am very bound by time, so I'll just jump quickly to Myanmar, and maybe in the question and answers it could be discussed more, sir. Myanmar, sir, is special because it is our land link to ASEAN, and again, it's a key link in neighborhood first as well as Act East policy, sir. It shares borders with 4 of our northeastern states, and therefore, cooperation is very important, and also lending itself to regional connectivity. We had signed an agreement on land border crossing with Myanmar in May 2018, which is special because it allows people on both countries to cross over their respective land boundaries with valid passports and visas. And this is actually in addition to something called a free movement regime, which allows people living within 16 kilometers of the border to actually pass the border. So, with Myanmar, we have also focused on infrastructure development on both sides of the border to enhance bilateral connectivity, which will actually sort of go into regional connectivity, and we are giving assistance to Myanmar for establishment of an ICP at Tamu. This will actually streamline facilities on both sides and improve trade and connectivity, because on our side, on More, there is already a functional ICP. Similarly, we are upgrading infrastructure upgradation of the land customs station at Dokauthar in Mizoram. We have also provided assistance to Myanmar in procurement of railway rolling stock, railway rehabilitation, and upgradation of workshops. I had mentioned in the case of Bangladesh, there is also a proposal for coordinated bus services between Mandalay and Imphal, and vice versa. It was supposed to start in April. However, it got delayed because of COVID. So once the situation settles down, that will also be ready to go. There are also there's an agreement for establishment of border huts across the border on both sides, and I think the first one of it is to come in Arunachal Pradesh, and we hope that will come pretty soon. Energy connectivity with Myanmar is also an important area of cooperation. Already there is actually a low voltage 3 megawatt radial interconnection through More, Manipur to Tamu. However, we are looking at a high capacity voltage grid interconnection with the Indian grid starting from the northeast to Yangon. This is actually still under a bit of negotiations and will come through. However, when we talk to Myanmar, there are two projects which actually have a very sort of a regional connotation and are very, very important to us. So, taking advantage of Myanmar's geographical location as a bridge between India and Southeast Asia, we are pushing the Kaladan multimodal transit transport project and the trilateral highway. The Kaladan project, yes, it's true, has been delayed, but in the recent times, there has been momentum, and it will ensure connectivity to our northeastern states, particularly Mizoram, but also will help in the augmentation of bilateral trade with Myanmar, but also with the region. And one of the components of this project is the Sitwe port in the Rakhine state, which will help sort of trade of local produce, especially from the Rakhine state to India. Sort of bundled with this, we are also in the advanced stage of negotiating a coastal shipping agreement, which will again also increase trade in the area. As far as the IMT, India-Myanmar Thailand highway is concerned, two projects of it are what we are undertaking. That is construction of 120 kilometers of Kalewa-Yaki road section to highway standard, and upgradation of 69 bridges and approach roads on the Tamu-Chigon-Kalewa road section, which is 150 kilometers. This project is under implementation. It has, despite the COVID circumstances, has gained some traction recently. And here, basically, the potential of this project is widely recognized. In fact, in the 17th ASEAN-India Virtual Summit, November 2020, there was a proposal for extension of this highway up to Cambodia, Laos, PDR, and Vietnam. Combined with this, actually, India and Myanmar are also discussing, and Thailand are also discussing, the motor vehicles agreement, which would enable seamless connectivity of movement, people, and cargo, directly linking at least India's northeast to the ASEAN region. So very quickly, in conclusion, I would like to say that insofar as engagement with Bangladesh and Myanmar is concerned, connectivity is the name of the game. Much has been achieved. There are many projects in the pipeline. Connectivity, I feel, is directly linked to economic prosperity, stability at the border, and in general leads to a win-win situation. There are certain issues, but they are not surmountable. And I would quote our Honorable Prime Minister from his remarks in the 17th India-ASEAN Virtual Summit. He said, speeding up all types of connectivity initiatives between India and ASEAN, physical, economic, social, digital, financial, maritime, is the top priority for us. And this, I would submit, would remain true in the BIMSTEC context as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Karthik, for that really comprehensive overview of the many facets of connectivity with Bangladesh and Myanmar. And I know that it's so critical to the larger connectivity ambitions that BIMSTEC has. Let me hand the floor back to Sunana as the moderator for this session. Sunana is Senior Fellow at Observer Research Foundation, and she's going to just outline a few of the ground rules and then conduct the rest of the conversation today. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ambassador Suri. And thank you also, Mr. Pandey, for that insightful commentary. And I'm sure we will be returning to a lot of points that you touched upon a little later in the discussion. For now, I see that we have a wonderful turnout this morning, which is great to see. Clearly, everyone is invested in the idea of BIMSTEC in 2021. And I will take just a couple of minutes to briefly introduce the agenda and the theme, and of course, our speakers for this morning. It will be 24 years to BIMSTEC this year. And it is a especially important year for BIMSTEC and to be discussing the changing geopolitical dynamics in the Bay of Bengal region as member states deal with contentious issues amongst themselves and also prepare for a post-pandemic world. We have a stellar lineup of speakers, and I would like to introduce them. We have Dr. Fehmida Khatun. She is the Executive Director at the Center for Policy Dialogue in Bangladesh. She will be speaking on the gender perspective on BIMSTEC. We have Mr. Achyut Bhandari. He is the co-founder at Center for Research on Bhutanese Society in Thimphu. He will be speaking on connectivity and the importance of Bhutan in BIMSTEC. Anusua Basure Chaudhary is senior fellow at ORF's Neighbourhood initiative, and she will be speaking on the migration and trafficking perspective in the region. We also have Mr. Sujeev Shakya. He is the chair of Nepal Economic Forum. He will be speaking on the economic development from the Nepal perspective. Mr. Sanjay Pulipaka is here, and he is the Senior Fellow for Research Programs and Strategic Neighborhood at the Delhi Policy Group. He will be presenting his perspective on the military coup and the political situation in Myanmar. Ms. Dinusha Panditaratne is here. She is advisor at Vedite Research in Sri Lanka. She will be speaking on maritime connectivity and the importance of Sri Lanka. And finally, we have Anjali Kongrut. She is an editor and columnist with the Bangkok Post in Thailand. She will be speaking on Thailand's perspective and Thailand taking over the chairmanship of BIMSTEC. A very warm welcome to all our speakers. I will very quickly go over some housekeeping announcements. Every panelist will be speaking for about 6 minutes, after which we will be opening the floor up for discussion. And we would be very happy to hear from all our audience and participants. Please do share your questions in the chat box. If you can, please do mention who the questions are directed to. And we will be taking those on later. I would now like to invite Dr. Fehmida Khatun to speak.
Yes. Thank you very much. Thank you, CNED of ORF, and thank you, Ms. Sunaina Kumar and Anushwa, who has been actually very patiently, after me to contribute and also take part in this very important meeting. I'm really happy that I could, I'm able to join today in this August gathering. And the topic I'm dealing with is very important, but quite often neglected. But it's not, it should not be that way. Because not only during COVID, but also during normal period, this is an issue, or women's issue is something which is often overlooked. But women are integral part of the economic development of every country, and particularly in the South Asian countries, we have seen that for the last couple of decades, how women's participation in the economy has increased. Now, in the context of COVID and in the context of BIMSTEC region, I would just highlight a number of issues which are important, and particularly how women's work has been affected during this ongoing pandemic in the Bay of Bengal Initiative for Multi-Sectoral Technical and Economic Cooperation, or BIMSTEC region. Because as we know that across the world, the COVID has an impact, negative impact on the women's in general, and particularly women through particularly employment loss and income loss. And the BIMSTEC region is no exception. So But however, let me just give a little background that how these countries have been doing in terms of filling up the gender gap, or in terms of improving the women's situation in the labor market and in education, etc. So these countries have made an improvement in case of women's empowerment over the past years, as I have mentioned, and women's participation in the labor market, educational qualification, and also participation in the decision-making jobs have also increased over time. However, there is still a gender gap in these countries, and we can mention a number of statistics which have been prepared by some international organizations. For example, the UNDP, United Nations Development Program's Human Development Report 2020, that shows that in terms of gender equality index, Bangladesh is ranked 103rd, and out of 189 countries, Bangladesh is ranked 133rd, Bhutan 99th, India 123rd, Myanmar 118th, Nepal 110th, Sri Lanka 90th, and Thailand was ranked 80th among these. This is in among these 189 countries in 2019. So we can see that some countries within the region there are some disparity also, or in terms of differences in terms of this in gender inequality. This is in fact inequality index, and so this index is done on the basis of labor market participation, income, education, all this. So so this is not a very impressive performance though. And recently in 2020, the World Economic Forum that also had undertaken some exercises, and it brings out something called Global Gender Gap Index, that is GGGI. So in 2020, out of 153 countries, 5 BIMSTEC countries, if we can, data have been available for 5 BIMSTEC countries like Bhutan, India, Myanmar, Nepal, Sri Lanka. So these 5 countries, their ranking is below 100th position, and Bangladesh ranks 50th, and Thailand ranks 75th among all these countries. So 5 and 6, 7 countries data we have, and all these countries actually have slipped in 2020 compared to 2018. So which also implies that this could be one of the reasons, is that this could be because of COVID-19 impact on women. So their situation has some of the countries have slipped down. But however, as COVID-19 is ongoing, so we are yet to get the full picture. Maybe in the coming days it may be different, maybe in the positives or negative, depending on how the economies recover. And the impact of the pandemic, what we are observing now, that may have a long-term implications on women's empowerment, because it has impacted disproportionately on women, particularly. Several research, the International Labour Organizations and many other organizations have undertaken a number of research which shows that it has impacted women disproportionately, and there are a number of reasons why it is. One of the reasons is that women tend to tend to be involved in informal activities. So their work is low paid. Those are without any appointment letter and without any job guarantee, and it's paid on an hourly basis. So this is one important reason. The other reason is also that women are also at the forefront of work during COVID-19. That the ILO had undertaken a study which shows that the high proportion of workers in essential services and frontline occupations, which accounts for 70% of health and social workers who are women and who are vulnerable to COVID-19 risk. The other reason is also that during the COVID-19, women had been also vulnerable to various types of violences, particularly domestic violences, because economic pressure had increased, and also work burden, the domestic work burden has increased. So it is the women who have to face that at the as a manager of the household. But if you also look at some of the important sectors within these regions, one of the important sectors for some of the countries is the export, and particularly the ready-made garments export. For Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, Myanmar, even for India to some extent, and Nepal. So, particularly for Bangladesh, majority of the workers who are working in the ready-made garment sector, those are women. Traditionally, it used to be 80%. Now it has come down to about 60%. But what had happened is that because at the onset of the COVID-19, the buyers had either cancelled or postponed their orders. So which meant that many factories had to close down, and as a result, women were first hit, and they had to go back home and stay without income. So this had not only implication on women, but the overall household income and welfare. So this had been also the case of other ready-made garments exporting countries. The other important sector in the BIMSTEC region is the tourism, and particularly Thailand, Sri Lanka, and Nepal. Their tourism is a very important source of income. And in Thailand, the share of employment is in the tourism sector is about 9%. In Sri Lanka, it is about 8%. In Nepal, it's about 6.8%. So women's participation is very high in these countries. And since COVID has immediately had impacted on the tourism sector, that also had an implication on women's job and income. So these are the two important sectors. Apart from that, there are several women who are engaged in the businesses, but women are usually engaged in micro, small, and medium enterprises. They are very few are in the large businesses. So during pandemic, all sorts of businesses have been affected, but the SME sectors have been affected mostly, and all of them, because of the demand, and because the nature of the pandemic has been such that both demand and supply disruptions have happened, and which led to closure of many businesses, or sizing downwards many of them. Now, in order to help women, particularly those who are into businesses and those who are poor, so there have been a number of measures, stimulus packages. All these governments across the world, they have initiated stimulus packages in order to support the economy, various sectors of the economy, large, small industries, agriculture, export-oriented, and all these. But one of the important features is that, of course, women had received some support, but the nature of, if you analyze the nature of the stimulus packages, you would find that these packages are not designed for women as such. Those are targeted for general sectors, but since there are some differences or some special features in terms of women's participation in the economy or women's participation in the businesses, those are not really targeted for women per se. So as a result, access to those stimulus packages by women have been very low. However, the initiatives which have been taken by various governments within the region, in the BIMSTEC region, is appreciable. It's commendable, and I may just mention a few. I dare to mention regarding the Indian stimulus packages, because all of you are much aware of much more aware of me than me. But just if I may
Sorry,
just
Dr.
mention,
Khatun,
yeah.
we're just running a little bit tight on
Okay,
time.
let me just, then I will not just go into the details of the
course.
stimulus packages, but I'll just, summarize the difficulties and let me, in 1 minute finish it. So what is, as I have mentioned, that since these are not targeted, so women have not been able to take advantage of many stimulus packages. For example, there are some structural problems. This is before pandemic, in fact, because when the commercial banks have packages for support for the entrepreneurs, women entrepreneurs has been facing problems even before the pandemic, because they are small, they are informal in nature. So when they go to the banks, they ask for various documents, including collaterals, bank guarantees, other necessary documents. So even trade licenses, many businesses, women owned businesses, they don't have also trade licenses. So these are the structural problems. Apart from that, there are also some reluctance from the bank's side. So to bank, because bank always look for the always worry, they worry about the return of their loans. So and they don't feel that women can be a trustworthy borrower. So that there's also a mindset issue. So these have actually not been very useful so far, the packages which have been. And there are other women who also work in the agriculture sector and all. So firstly, the inadequacy of the stimulus packages for them, and the secondly is the access to finance, whatever has been announced. So finally, I would say that there is a need for further support for women to reinstate them into their business and also create more income opportunities for them, and then whatever is available, facilitate their access. So this will help them to get back to their work. And we also don't want to see that whatever achievement has been made so far, those being reversed because of COVID-19. So in order to do that, I think there are more more to do by the respective governments. Thank you very much.
If I can invite Mr. Bhandari, who's joining us from Thimphu.
Yes, good afternoon, everybody. I wish to thank Dr. Anasura Ray Chowdhury for inviting me to participate in this panel discussion. I don't know to what extent I can fulfill her expectations. I'll try my best. Before doing that, I would like to thank. Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, I'd like to thank the previous speakers, Ambassador Suri, Director Pandey, and Madam Khatun, who have made a very valuable points. I wish the organizers had also invited the relevant official from the MOEA to talk about connectivity with Bhutan and Nepal, because in as much as Bangladesh and Myanmar has been covered, coming from Bhutan, a landlocked country, I feel a little bit, left behind, because we would have liked to hear the Indian, approaches, Indian strategy in developing connectivity with Nepal and Bhutan. But I'm sure we'll have opportunities to hear about that later. Moving on to the topic of my discussion, I've been asked to talk about BIMSTEC with particular reference to connectivity. And I'd like to share some very broad points based on my own interest, my experience, and not necessarily based on any particular research. The first point I would like to say is that the COVID impact has underscored the importance of transport and connectivity so much that Bhutan, for instance, had to take additional measures to prepare border infrastructure. This was necessary in view of the regulated import and to some extent export that was taking place or is still taking place during this period, because unlike in normal time, the government had to intervene to procure imports, especially of essential and supplies and food grains, and particularly from India, so that the population is not adversely affected. So we needed a large area for these vehicles to park, to load, unload, to store, transship, and all that. So because of that, we had to take initiative to construct temporary structures and also look at mobilize other facilities to store these goods. So in the context, so that really underscores the very important need for having good borders infrastructure, as also as the connectivity. The other side effect of this COVID has been that the cost of transportation has increased to a large extent. And the Bhutanese business community importing from countries other than India have faced delays and have been difficult to get their orders in. If we have a good network of communication, I'm sure such problems would have been minimized, although not reduced altogether. So this is one important lesson that Bhutan has learned from it, and as a consequence, we have recently, as a matter of fact, today, a consultancy firm is submitting a feasibility report on a dry port in central South Bhutan, a place called Nganglam, which is near to the Indian town of, let's say, it's Rangapani in the Assam side. And also, we have also started constructing a dry port in another place, 2 dry ports, as a matter of fact. So COVID has accelerated the need for construction of these facilities. The second point I like to make on this is that, if you look at the areas of cooperation under BIMSTEC, there are 14 and even more, depending how one counts it, And I was just going through them, and at least half of them, of course, all of the areas of cooperation depend on having good connectivity links. There's no doubt about that. But more importantly, at least about half of them are directly dependent on good transport and connectivity links among the BIMSTEC countries. Now, despite the BIMSTEC, having been in existence for now almost 24 years, I don't think all of us can be proud of making those connectivities far better than what they were at that time. But I'm glad to know that initiatives are being taken, and especially since the last 4 or 5 years, the interest and commitment to forge cooperation within BIMSTEC is at a higher level than we saw before that. I hope that this will be sustained. The third point I'd like to make is that from Bhutan's perspective, there are 4 areas in which this transport and connectivity is central to Bhutan's development, as also as its relations with the neighboring countries and the rest of the world. The first, obviously, is the road connectivity. I think the studies have shown that within the BIMSTEC region, between 60 to 70% of movements or trade takes place by road. So therefore, for a hilly, for a landlocked country like Bhutan, roads are the principal source of communication within the country and within the neighborhood. So if the road connectivity improves in India, in Bangladesh, in Nepal, and in other countries, obviously Bhutan stands to benefit. And we have already seen this from intervention made by the government of India in improving the national highway, I think NS31, and also the links to the trading ports in land ports in Bangladesh and Nepal, which has helped to improve efficiency in transportation. The second area would be obviously the water transportation. When I say water transportation, it means both river transportation as well as sea. River transportation has been mentioned by Mr. Pandey in the context of Bangladesh. If these, if this mode of transport becomes more prominent, we will also benefit. Now, for instance, I'll give an example. Bhutan can transport some of its products using the Brahmaputra, starting from Guwahati, the port of Pandu, which is already operational, but unfortunately, for some reason, Bhutan has not used it yet. But it as a matter of fact, we have asked the government to make a study as to how Guwahati can be a one sort of a center for our trade and for water transport, even air transport, because Bhutan airline, the Bhutanese aircraft goes to Guwahati also, and also can feed to the dry port that is being constructed at a place called Nganglam, which I mentioned earlier, in the border between Assam and Bhutan. So from Pandu, so we can use the Pandu from the Pandu port from the eastern part of Bhutan. We can use Jogi Ghopa and Dhubri from the central part of Bhutan, for trade with Bangladesh. We already have agreements with both India and Bhutan in order to use these ports. Unfortunately, the facilities, are not up to the mark. Facilities, when I say the port facilities, river port facilities, transportation arrangements, and all that, still we need to look at it. And if those could be augmented and developed, Bhutan directly stands to benefit. And for sea transportation, obviously, if the shipping agreements come through, the coastal shipping agreements, hopefully will improve port facilities and bring greater connectivity between India and other countries outside. That will directly benefit Bhutan, including through the possible use of ports in Bangladesh, for which we already have a bilateral agreement. For instance, using Chittagong, using Mongla, and also Paira, which sometimes we tend to overlook. Yet the COVID has again reinstated the importance of digital connectivity, and this is relevant for all areas of cooperation, especially in e-commerce, making digital payments, for travel and tourism industry, and trade and investment. So we need to augment cooperation in these areas so that all the member countries, including Bhutan, can benefit from it. And a final point is that, very short, that I know that India's neighborhood and look east policy is in play. I guess this itself is one of the examples, and I do hope that with India's leadership and good cooperation with the neighboring countries, we can make BIMSTEC a little bit more fruitful than it has been so far. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. I would now like to invite Mr. Shakya, who's joining us from Kathmandu this morning. I should also mention that he has another engagement, so he will be with us till 12:45. In which case, if there are any questions directed at him, I would request you to share those with us, and we'll take those on. It's over to you.
Um, thank you, Sunaina. Okay, thank you, and thank you, Arif, for having me for this discussion. I think it's a very opportune time that we try to look at BIMSTEC post-pandemic. As far as Nepal is concerned, we hosted the 2018 summit here in Kathmandu, the BIMSTEC summit, but after that, we haven't seen much of action. If we look at Nepal as a country, we have been very much engaged in our internal issues, factions fighting against each other, very inward looking, and perhaps we lost the entire 2019 and 2020 to these. But having said that, I think there is, the pandemic has got us to understand some of the major challenges. At the same time, we have also been able to see the opportunities. And if we look at the opportunities, we see that the digital transformation has really taken up like never before. So there is a newer opportunity when we talk about connectivity within the BIMSTEC countries. We can look at digital transformations. We can look at, accesses that comes in, say, for digital finance, accesses with a digital commerce. And we have been seeing content being consumed like never before. People are downloading Nepali music in other countries. We are, people are watching different set of contents in different parts, and new platforms have emerged, and that perhaps can help to push the P2P agenda that we continuously talk about. Especially, I have always looked at and been a propagand of the people-to-people agenda. And perhaps this pandemic has opened up a wonderful opportunity where we can say, how do we connect between the countries, people to people? We are all aware of the structural challenges of the, BIMSTEC as an institution. It's been there for 24 years. So it's a good time to introspect as to what are the things that needs to be done to really bring about the changes. One of the things from the Nepali perspective, it's very important to understand is that earlier we were, I say, not landlocked, but were India locked, because we had only trade and transit agreement with India. But now that has opened up with China also. And as we have seen in the recent years, China through its BRI has made a lot of interventions in this part of the world. And so when we are discussing BIMSTEC, we cannot not discuss the elephant in the room. And other regions for trade. And not only Nepal gets connected, I think Nepal gets connected to China, and Bangladesh can connect to China through Nepal. India, of course, can connect it to Nepal. So it changes the way in which we look at the paradigm shift in how we look at BIMSTEC as such. So I do see that, of course, if you look at all regional cooperation, especially having been working in Africa, East Africa community worked wonderfully well to find transit means to landlocked countries, be it goods coming to Uganda and Tanzania to Rwanda these times. So what are some of the learnings we can see within EU, within other sort of cooperation group? Perhaps BIMSTEC can learn towards that. It is the vaccine diplomacy that India has started with its neighbors. It's very laudable, and I think it does bring in a new chapter in terms of how a country through its diplomacy actually connects with the people. It is not taking ministers for junkets. It's not taking, business investments, but it's actually connecting to the people. And I think that has had a very good impression on the Nepali people as we are receiving vaccines, are getting vaccinated. And so it is a good time to say that, we cannot live in isolation. We need to spread out. We need to look at what is happening in the region, what can happen, and the potential. So finally, I've always been a propagand of East-South Asia. So where I see seamless connectivity from Nepal right up to Myanmar, Thailand, and right up to Vietnam. And I think the pandemic has given a great opportunity to revisit this and look forward to cooperating more, thinking more, and perhaps discussing what we can do together. Thank you very much, Nena. Over to you.
Thank you very much. All our speakers have given us much food for thought. I would like to invite Ms. Pandita Ratne next.
Thank you very much, Sunena. And thank you also to RF for inviting me to give a Sri Lankan perspective on BIMSTEC today. I would start by saying I'm not an expert on BIMSTEC as an organizational grouping, and I've really enjoyed the opportunity to hear so much more from our distinguished panelists today. But I will take these few minutes to highlight some recent developments in Sri Lanka's foreign relations in its capacity as chair of BIMSTEC, but also more broadly in its international relations. And then I'd like to consider what these developments may mean for Sri Lanka's approach to BIMSTEC in the near future. So, I mean, firstly, in terms of recent developments in relation to BIMSTEC, as you are no doubt aware, Sri Lanka has been chair for the last 2 years in some quite challenging times, given domestic, for example, terrorist attacks in 2019, political transitions later that year, and of course, enormous challenges of COVID since early 2020. Not just in Sri Lanka, but throughout the region, of course. So I think given that difficult context, the Sri Lankan government and the foreign ministry would be reasonably satisfied with what it has achieved during its tenure as chair. They've managed to keep things moving along through virtual meetings, through COVID. They've steered the finalization of the text of the long-awaited BIMSTEC Charter. There was reference made to the many priority sectors before. There's been a rationalization of that from 14 sectors to seven clusters. And Sri Lanka will hopefully be hosting the next ministerial meeting in early April of this year with a summit at a still unspecified date. So, so in terms of its chairmanship of BIMSTEC, I think there's some reason to be fairly satisfied. However, there are also a number of broader challenges in Sri Lanka's foreign policy that have become more apparent recently, and I would classify them as respectively economic challenges, political challenges, and systemic challenges. And I'll just highlight a couple of examples before considering how those might affect its engagement with BIMSTEC. Economically, like elsewhere in the region, the pandemic has, of course, been a real shock. The GDP of Sri Lanka in the first 9 months of 2020 contracted over 5% from the same period the previous year, and that was quite already a low bar. And most significantly, the pandemic has exacerbated Sri Lanka's high debt levels and its low foreign reserves to repay that debt. Politically, Sri Lanka has both bilateral and multilateral challenges. Bilaterally, there are some key relationships that have come under strain in recent months, including with India and Japan and the US over particular projects. Or proposed projects. Multilaterally, Sri Lanka is preoccupied with the international dialogue concerning Sri Lanka's human rights. These various economic and political challenges are related to what also could be described as more systemic challenges in Sri Lanka's foreign policy. There are several such systemic challenges, but just to mention one, I would personally think that there is less clarity in national leadership than there was around a year ago. If we go back to the end of 2019, the newly elected president was articulating his views, for example, on a peaceful Indian Ocean, and on potentially even renegotiating the terms of the Hambantota port. This approach now seems quite a long time ago, and we're not frequently hearing sort of what the articulation of foreign policy priorities in that manner. So I would say the sort of leadership now is a little more, a little less singular and a bit more pixelated, if you like. So these are some of the broader foreign policy issues in Sri Lanka. In terms of what these could mean for Sri Lanka's engagement with BIMSTEC in the near future, there's a lot to say, but I'll just mention one aspect. Given the economic situation with the low foreign reserves that I referred to earlier, the government has, for example, imposed import restrictions and a number of other measures to deal with that situation. And so I would see this as not a particularly conducive time for Sri Lanka to sort of actively support the free trade objectives of BIMSTEC, including the long discussed BIMSTEC FTA. You know, Sri Lanka's current reticence, some may say, is also stemming not just from the economic challenges I referred to earlier, but also from sort of more systemic issues. The previous government was perhaps more internationalist in tone, though not always in practice. The present government perhaps more nationalist in tone, and therefore somewhat conflicted about its engagement in certain respects, including trade. So a recent headline in a newspaper, for example, did say that the government was considering free trade agreements, and two of those agreements, actually three of those agreements on the cards were with BIMSTEC countries, a new trade agreement with India, trade agreements with Thailand and Bangladesh. But I don't see those advancing that much because it is also simultaneously talking, you know, in the same headlines about revisiting existing FTA. So there's an inconsistent position there. So instead of trade within BIMSTEC, Sri Lanka may be more willing to engage in COVID resilience measures to support the economy, and a number of the other speakers mentioned those kind of measures that that would be important to take, especially in relation to digital commerce. For example, fostering a cooperation between technological training institutes, or perhaps more broadly through national chambers of commerce. I would agree with the other speakers that that gender and climate are also very important issues that they would hope to take up. I don't want to exceed my allocated time, but we'll close by saying that, of course, BIMSTEC holds potential in so many more areas, not just in trade. But partly because of the pressures of the pandemic, I think Sri Lanka will find it difficult to engage in a number of those potential areas. And apart from Sri Lanka's own particular challenges, I think that some of the speakers have touched on the broader issues for BIMSTEC to address for it to really take off the ground, including developing strong cultural and people-to-people links, because it is a sort of a cross-regional organization between South Asia and Southeast Asia. And sometimes one might observe that because the Southeast Asian countries already have a strong regional grouping in ASEAN, you know, there might be perhaps slightly less engagement from those countries compared to the South Asian countries, evident, for example, in the seniority of officials that attend some of the meetings. So that's something also to consider. I also haven't touched on the evolving question of each BIMSTEC members evolving bilateral relations with China, and how that might impact BIMSTEC, but that's also another question for people to consider. So I will leave it there, and thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I would like to request Mr. Pulipaka to share his perspective now.
Thank you. Good afternoon. Thanks to Ambassador Navdeep Suri, Dr. Anaswaba Suri Chowdhury. Dr. Sunaina Kumar for the invitation. Thanks to ORF as well. ORF Calcutta has been doing some sustained research on connectivity between India and its eastern neighbors for quite some time. Glad to be part of this quality platform. As we all know, BIMSTEC framework seeks to bridge South Asia and Southeast Asia. Well, BIMSTEC was neither subjected to complete neglect, nor was it operationalized with great enthusiasm. Between 2004 and 2014, it had only 3 summit meetings. Of course, there were plethora of other ministerial level meetings involving senior officials as well. The 2016 Goa retreat raised hopes that BIMSTEC will be revived and it will gain momentum. And the 4th BIMSTEC summit was held in Nepal in 2018. I think the next summit, as the earlier speaker was pointing it out, will be held in Sri Lanka as and when the things improve. In the past few years, the locus of regional economic integration in South Asia has been shifting eastwards. This has a lot to do with India's desire for economic integration with countries in immediate and extended neighborhood. In the eastern neighborhood, the rapid growth of Bangladesh, Nepal's desire for modifying or diversifying its trade relationships as well. And because of these various factors, we are seeing emergence of new regional frameworks such as BIMSTEC or even BBIN for that matter in the recent past. As we all know, Bangladesh economy has been doing very well. The country has showcased impressive economic growth rate of 7% consistently since 2016. In 2019, it grew at 8.2%. And the current estimates indicate by IMF that in spite of COVID, it is still growing at 3%. Coming to Myanmar, Myanmar is an interesting case in BIMSTEC in the sense that it joined ASEAN in 1995, BIMSTEC in 1997. Myanmar, Burma, I will use these words interchangeably. I don't have a political position on those words. Burma was under Western sanctions through the 90s, and it saw these new platforms, multilateral platforms, as a gateway to engage with the external world. The need to diversify economic and political relationship was important trigger behind Myanmar's decision to join regional frameworks such as BIMSTEC. During the 2019 BIMSTEC expert group meetings in Naypyidaw, Myanmar was talking about or referred to the importance of energy trade. It is understandable because Myanmar's natural gas is going to China and Thailand, and they want to diversify their energy relationships, and they want to use the natural gas for domestic energy consumption requirements as well. So therefore, Myanmar's agenda in BIMSTEC is defined again by its domestic requirements, such as the energy requirements from its own natural gas. Of course, there are challenges in the current geopolitical context from the way Myanmar is engaging with the regional framework. The most important challenge has been the military coup in Myanmar. For the next few months, Myanmar will be looking inward and its proactive participation. There will may be a challenge. In the general elections that were held in November 2020, Aung San Suu Kyi's National League for Democracy registered a landslide victory, as we all know, almost winning 80% of the seats. While the Myanmar military raised concerns about the voter rolls, inaccurate voter rolls, there was very little expectation that there would be a military coup around the corner. But nonetheless, I mean, where did that expectation come from? Because whatever may be the differences between Aung San Suu Kyi and military, Aung San Suu Kyi, there is a perception, did not fundamentally undermine the interests of the Myanmar military in the sense that, for instance, if you notice during the Rohingya or the sectarian violence in the Rakhine state, she stood up on the international platforms protecting or advocating the cause of Myanmar military, saying that the genocide did not happen. In spite of those things, on February 1st, we had military coup. Suu Kyi was detained, President Win Myint and others were also arrested, and Myanmar military took over the reins of the government. The military promised to hold on to power till the next elections were organized. However, given the recent history, there is very little confidence that new elections will be held within 1 year and there would be free and fair elections. In the past 1 month, I mean, it's almost a month now, in a few days, there have been large-scale protests and they are growing. These protests have not toppled the military government. On the other hand, Myanmar military was not able to consolidate power and ensure normalcy. The fragmented political authority of Myanmar is even more fragmented now. US has imposed targeted sanctions. EU is considering them. India has expressed grave concern. Myanmar today is becoming slowly more and more dependent on China. Strangely, the situation that Myanmar military leaders were trying to extricate themselves in 1990s is threatening to come back due to their own actions. As in 1990s, early 1990s, the Myanmar military leaders are seeking to consolidate their control on political power. But as in 1995 and 1997, Myanmar military regime today is also looking for international validation of its rule. And BIMSTEC will be an important platform as well. Therefore, Myanmar military will be proactively participating in BIMSTEC frameworks, or will be eager to participate in the BIMSTEC frameworks. However, the world is not same as it was in 1995. In 2020, the Myanmar military is yet to consolidate its hold on its power. Of course, it's just a month, it may take more time. And there are campaigns within Myanmar and outside Myanmar that BIMSTEC countries will also have to factor when they're engaging with Myanmar. So what are the next steps and how do we move forward to conclude? Of course, we need to focus on functional cooperation and scale up Myanmar connectivity with Myanmar. And the earlier speakers, including the MEA officials, pointed to it. We need to have a BIMSTEC connectivity plan, focus on motor vehicle agreements, and of course, most importantly, as the developments have shown, it is important to have diversified digital networks to ensure participatory political processes survive. Can BIMSTEC do something about it? Given the political fluidity in the countries, probably it is important that we can progress BIMSTEC cooperation under counter-terrorism and transnational crime rubric, under the rubric of BIMSTEC. Probably the annual meeting of national security chiefs would be a starting point, since it is security chiefs interacting. And Myanmar military, we have been interacting with Myanmar military on security issues over the years. And probably then it would not amount to taking a stance on evolving political transition in Myanmar. The Myanmar developments also raise a larger question on the composition of BIMSTEC. Is it imperative that we need to add one more country, a maritime Asian country, Indonesia? Should it be part of the evolving BIMSTEC framework? There have been reports that Indonesia is leading conversations as a representative of ASEAN in Myanmar. We don't know how these conversations may shape up or the consequences will be, but it points to an important fact that Indonesia as a leading power, probably we should consider, not merely because it is getting involved in Myanmar today. We should also consider Indonesia because it is the most eligible candidate as a Bay of Bengal country. As a $1 trillion economy, as a maritime neighbor, as an important ASEAN member. With this, I would like to conclude. Probably my presentation gave you some questions to reflect on. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Pulipaka. I should also mention that two of our speakers had to leave us, Dr. Fahmida Khatun and Mr. Sujeev Shakya. But if the audience has questions for any of the other speakers, we will be addressing those. We're running just a little late, but we will be taking on questions. I would like to request Ms. Congroot to speak next.
Okay. First of all, I have to thank you, ORF and Dr. Anasua Chowdhury and staff at the ORF for roping me in. Let me introduce myself. My name is Anjali Congroot. I'm columnist at the Bangkok Post and assistant news editor. But all opinions and perspective are entirely my own. So what I'm going to talk about today, it's about the BIMSTEC meeting in Bangkok this year and next year, and then what country expect to hear in Bangkok from this year and next year's, and minor hiccup, which is Myanmar coup and effect to the BIMSTEC in all. And at the end, I will finalize conclusions that what should be done in the next few years in my own perspective. So this year, in June 6th this year, there will be big meeting of the BIMSTEC 24th year in Bangkok. We don't know whether or not it will be online or in person, but judging from the current COVID-19 pandemic, the meeting will be 2 years, this year and next year. Next year we'll celebrate 25 years of the BIMSTEC, which is I have to say that Ministry of Foreign Affairs in Thailand take this meeting very seriously. But of course, what Thai government going to discuss is two things. First one is infrastructure development. The second one is a free trade agreement. This is the core basis of the agenda. First thing, it's an infrastructure. There are two things. It's maritime and land. The maritime is the port in Ranong, which is pretty close to Myanmar. And another one, possibly, it's industrial estate and deep sea port in later part of in the lower part of Thailand, which is okay. And another one is quite important. This is a 1,300 kilometer highway that will connect from Tak district through Myanmar to Bangladesh and to northern part of India. This is the main, I think this is a vital connectivity between Thailand and BIMSTEC. Secondly, it's going to be about free trade agreement. Particularly in next year, which is going to be 25-year celebrations of BIMSTEC Thailand. In the same year, it's going to be the share of APEC and then a BIMSTEC as well. So the country, now Thailand is negotiating FTA with the other 5 countries, including EU as well. So Ministry of Foreign Affairs will look at the BIMSTEC as the replacement of another more expanded trade platform, partly because India did not sign RCEP. So BIMSTEC will be rolled in as a replacement. This is my own perspective. This is my own opinion. So that will happen in Thailand, meeting in Thailand in this year and next year. But the problem is we don't know about, FTA take a long time. And I will touch another subject, which is major hiccup. This is Myanmar. This is interesting too. The previous speaker said that Indonesia, Myanmar, and Thailand is going to have a secret meeting about a coup. And today there is a news rather, highly likely that a plane from Myanmar and Indonesia landed at that Don Mueang airport today. So it is expected that high-ranked military and foreign ministry from Indonesia and Thai will speak about political issue in Myanmar with Myanmar. So refer to that. I think ASEAN will be drawn to have more say in the issues about the Myanmar politics. So, and another aspects about BIMSTEC and Thailand, a part of infrastructures and a part of FTA, there will be more discussions about the need to form other collaborations between people to people, fishery, environment, and public health. And if you look into 14 aspects of cooperations between BIMSTECs and BIMSTEC's members, Thailand are responsible for 3 areas: public health, fishery, and people to people. And so far, we haven't seen any concrete. There are only MOU or talk about collaborations. So indeed, in terms of the conservationists or NGO or people, they wish to see more cooperations about the marine cooperation, because if you see, there are a lot, you can share Thailand, Myanmar, or Bangladesh and India, you see there are a lot of fishery activity going on. There should be more cooperations about the illegal fishery, as well as in terms of environment. There's just a lot of problem about coastal erosions or any sea storm, sea surge. There should be more cooperations on mangrove forestations or help on natural disaster in that fishery. And in terms of public health, I checked with the MOU between public health ministries and some countries in BIMSTEC. It's just the exchange, but I did not see any concrete exchange. But hopefully the COVID-19 will lead to more enhanced cooperations between member countries. But what I see, what is interesting in Thailand among the academic experts or people in Ministry of Foreign Affairs, they are demand for more closer cooperation in terms of tourism and religion and culture. And I think that is a platform to go from there, because last year, interesting, there is the cultural fairs on BIMSTEC in the central Bangkok. There will be, it's about the movies, it's about the food, it's about the religions, and people pay a lot of attention and welcome, because we share a lot of cultural similarity. So in conclusion, what I think there will be significant improvement in Bangkok, maybe maybe not this year but next year, because it's going to be the 25 years of the BIMSTECs, and of course the issue of Myanmar need to be solved, because we have to admit the reality that Thailand share a border with Myanmar, and Myanmar is a very, very crucial junctions that can serve as a platform from the ASEAN to Bengal, the Bay of Bengal area. Without engagement from Myanmar, active engagement, this regional platform is likely, it's hard to make a progress in that. Personally, I think despite the background or histories of the BIMSTEC is quite low in terms of the progress, but I think that I look forward for better cooperations, but if not trade agreement, if not infrastructures progress, I think it's more and more on people level. So for now, this is my opinion for now. Okay.
Thank you very much for that. And at the end, we would like to bound this up by inviting Anuswari Chaudhary to speak next.
Thank you, Sunaina. And, following our age-old Indian tradition that our neighbors first, our friends first, that's why I've requested Sunaina to place me as the last speaker. Well, it is indeed a pleasure to take part in these discussion today. And as we are gathered here to discuss various aspects of BIMSTEC and on its future, I think it would not be exaggeration, or it would be further apt to talk about some critical issues like undocumented migration and human trafficking. Trafficking of women and children is day by day increasing, and it has become a pressing issue and urgent concern for the countries of the Bay of Bengal region. Under these circumstances, I think I would like to draw your attention to one of the important points, which is in order to strengthen inclusive development, I think it is important to strengthen the participation of vulnerable groups in mainstream development. And also it is important to reduce gender discrimination and promoting the development of social capital. So against this backdrop, my brief presentation or sharing of my views, I think would be interesting. Since the available statistics are very limited and contested in nature on human trafficking, specifically and particularly women trafficking and trafficking of children, it is really very difficult to create an exhaustive map of current situation. Nonetheless, I think the available data has managed to draw BIMSTEC member states' attention to trafficking issues. If we very quickly look at some data provided by UNODC in its latest publication published in 2018, entitled Global Report on Trafficking in Person, we see that the trend is increasing, though they have not devoted any specific segment for BIMSTEC. They have mentioned the regions like South Asia and East Asia and Pacific. But if we can collate data from that, we will see that within South Asia, women account for 59%, those who are regarded as victims of trafficking, and men account for 37%. And the position of sexual exploitation and trafficking for forced labor, this is equally poised, 50-50. But the situation in Thailand and Myanmar, these are also very alarming. But we have agreed, all the member states have agreed on a specific point, that the routes, methods, and activities of traffickers have become highly organized, digitized, with crime syndicates having a greater degree of penetration, both within and outside the Bay region. And we all probably know that some countries have been regarded as sending countries, some are termed as receiving countries, but on ground, the situation is not so simplistic. Because as say, for example, India sometimes is being regarded as a site of destination, while on the other aspect, India is in more like transit country in this particular process. So where it works as an mediatory space. We know that there are several documents. Say, for example, documents by Justice and Care Association of Border Security Force of India, that they have stated that in last 1 decade, more than a few lakhs have been women and children. They were trafficked from Bangladesh. And National Human Rights Commission, the report published in 2018, it says that over than 35% Nepali citizens were trafficked from Nepal to India. But which is above all more alarming is the migration or the trafficking of women and children from the Rohingya refugee camps of Bangladesh. In fact, US State Department published a report in 2018. It also has reiterated this alarming condition. But I think what I want to highlight here is the precarity of the women, those who are being trafficked, or the children, those who are being trafficked. Once these women are trafficked from one country to another, they actually they lose their rights and become virtually stateless. Why? Because it's very in most of the cases it's very difficult for these trafficked women to prove their identities, and some start their journey as migrant workers, but ultimately leading towards brothels, primarily because there are no authorized safe passage for or channel for migrant women workers to guarantee their employment and also remuneration. So with these few words, if we look at the initiatives or the responses that we have get from the BIMSTEC countries, we will see that responses are at two levels, one at bilateral level and at the BIMSTEC regional level. Well, bilateral level, of course, the path-breaking landmark, decision is the MOU signed between India and Bangladesh in 2015, emphasizing on the definition, those who have been trafficked, and also repatriation and the joint task force. Following the same line, India is keen to have a kind of understanding with Nepal, with Myanmar very recently in 2019, putting emphasis on rescue 4 Rs: rescue, recovery, repatriation, and reintegration. So far as the BIMSTEC is concerned, I think Sanjay has touched upon very briefly on the segment of terrorism and organized international crime. BIMSTEC has devoted a separate segment called CTTC and started its journey in 2007. It's counterterrorism and transnational crime, and accordingly in 2009, BIMSTEC has adopted a convention on cooperation in combating CTTC. But I'm very sorry to say that within the definition of CTTC, it doesn't include undocumented migration and human trafficking. So with these, with these few data, and if BIMSTEC wants to be more than alliance, what BIMSTEC intends to be a regional organization, I think some important steps to be taken in near future. And I will conclude my brief deliberation by highlighting these points. The first one, under the ambit of CTTC, more focused and coordinated effort should be adopted to tackle all the interconnected segments of human trafficking. Secondly, the definition of human trafficking must be considered in a more holistic manner and inclusive way, keeping the dynamics of all facets of cross-border undocumented migration in consideration. Thirdly, for the possible cross-border cooperation, member states must strengthen infrastructure as well as institutional connectivity, enhancing CTTC. Fourthly, of course, very important is exchange of information amongst the member states. The next one is different stakeholders relevant for this process, those who are working on ground, that is NGOs and civil society groups, should be taken care of and should be engaged proactively in these process. And lastly, I think, which is a really very important aspect for BIMSTEC to look at, is that it should work towards linking gender perspective with migration and labor laws. And I think Ambassador Suri in his initial comment has talked about human capital. So all these points are related to human capital, which ultimately will lead to strengthen people-to-people connectivity. At the end, we have to keep it in our mind that whose connectivity is it anyway? It's people's connectivity. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Everyone here is a passionate advocate for BIMSTEC, and I think that's the perfect note to conclude our discussion with. I understand that our speakers and participants may have other time engagements, and we were supposed to be wrapping up the webinar at 1 o'clock. If it is okay with everyone, we will just extend it by another 10 minutes or so and take on some questions. The first question that we have is from Mr. Ranjit Kumar, and it is addressed to Mr. Karthik Pandey. The question is, when do you expect trilateral highway to become operational?
Thank you. So basically, as per the information which I have here, that work there are two segments to the trilateral highway. Basically, one is construction of the 120 kilometers Kalewa-Yagi road section to highway standards, and other is upgradation of 69 bridges and approach road in the Tamuchigon sector. So work is underway in both basically these sectors, and I mean the general ballpark figure is 2022. However, I mean, I have to sort of have a caveat there. It depends upon many other things, including, weather, and the terrain is especially treacherous in those areas. So work has been continuing, and now they have come to a particular alignment of this. So as of now, 2022 seems to be a good bet, but when in 2022, I maybe it'll just be hazarding a guess right now.
That's fair enough. Thank you. The next question is from Colonel Hariharan, and he says that we've been hearing about the Kaladan project for the last 15 years. What exactly are the issues holding up land connectivity, and is it environmental issues or lack of interest? If Mr. Karthik Pandey and perhaps Mr. Sanjay Polipaka could also take this on.
Maybe with Mr. Sanjay's permission, I'll just start. So basically, yes, it is true that the project is around 15 years in the making now. But recently, there has been progress. One of the main elements there, of course, I mean, the project again has two major components. One is a port at Sitwe in the Rakhine state, and the other one, I mean, the river then goes up to Paleva, and then there is a road from Paleva till Zoranpui. Again, in the road sector, it has been plagued by security issues. We know in Myanmar, but what we have done is we have started pushing the road sector from the Indian end, that is from Zoranpui downwards and from Paleva upwards. So there has been good progress actually in the recent past in this particular sector. And also the port at Sitwe is ready. The port sort of operator has been already appointed by the Indian and the Myanmar government. And there are, of course, some work to be done to make the port fully operational, including dredging, etc. So work there is also going on. So my analysis there would be that, yes, the work did not happen initially as per expected, but in the last 5 years, there has been substantive progress. And again, we hope that the momentum is continued, then which will maybe will lead to an early operationalization of the port as well as the road segment of it. Thanks.
Thank you. I mean, I don't have much to add other than saying that I think the road network has also been expanded midway through the project, so which resulted in further delays. In terms of security issues, recently some of the Indian workers were kidnapped. The strength of Arakan army has increased from double digits to almost thousands now. I won't give a correct, I'm not in a position to give an exact number. And then there were, of course, legal issues. Some of the contractors went to that was with reference to, I think, trilateral highway. They went to Supreme Court. I think the case went all the way up to Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court gave a permission to continue the projects. So the usual Indian delays that happen we have hampered the project as well. Thank you.
Okay, we're going to take on one final question now, and that comes in from Mr. Pandey. It is, considering BIMSTEC in the contemporary scenario, can we say it is the revival of non-alignment policy and Act East policy, or is it more global?
I would say maybe I am not particularly qualified to answer this question, but from the Bangladesh-Myanmar perspective, I can definitely see that question is a bit political. I would, my sense would be that, to me, economics always trumps politics. So moment when we focus on economics, connectivity, etc., that will always lead to solutions. Thank you.
Okay. Well, I would just like to thank our wonderful panel and Mr. Pandey and Ambassador Suri, our panel which has joined us from different cities and different time zones this afternoon. And I would also like to say that we've heard a variety of perspectives, and we hope to take forward some of these perspectives at ORF forward through the year. Through our research and other programs. I hope you enjoyed this discussion and have a good afternoon.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thanks a lot.
So much. Thank you.